to share with you how we are on a journey around social justice, and we are looking for you to provide us some guidance as we go on this journey today. So at this time, I'll turn it over to them.
I think I have a mic. Is it working? Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Augusta University again. My name is Dr. Quinn, and I'm one of the program faculty in our EDD program. And just so you'll know who everyone is, I have my colleagues with me here, Dr. Buning, Dr. Christodoulou, and Dr. Darla Linville, and then our magnificent students in our first cohort, Marianne Gray and Angela Williams. I'm a bit of a philosopher, so I want to share just a little quote from, two quotes from my favorite philosophers, Jacques Derrida. And he did a landmark piece on deconstruction and the possibility of justice. And he says, one must be just with justice. And the first way to do it justice is to hear, read, interpret it, to try to understand where it comes from and what it wants of us. And then later in that piece, he says, justice remains, is always yet to come, a veneer. So we thought that today what we might want to share with you about our program, to pick up from the last conference or convening, was to share with you our journey into social justice. And from what I'm told, invite you to probe our practice a little bit or inquire with us into our practice to think about how we might maintain this commitment to social justice, deepen it, and move it forward. So that's what we're hoping to do today, and there's a longer, you have a lot of handouts on your tables, so there's a longer description of what our aspirations are today. But that's what we're hoping, is to really get some help from you and share with you how we've begun.
Well, I think social justice is a layered, complicated term, and it's not easily captured by a simple definition. But I think of it as different groups of people in dramatically different contexts and different historical moments coming together to fight for more equity, more equality, more access, more recognition, more peace. And I think recognition is an important part of it that's often left out. A lot of people talk about justice as access and equity, and it is that. That's important. But it's also recognition of the humanity of everyone, every human being. And I think recently we've all gotten a terrific lesson in how a social movement can change the world in the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered movement, and particularly in the last couple of years, being brought to consciousness around issues of transgendered people. Education is another layered term. When we say teaching for social justice, teaching is a very complicated term. Education is always about two things. It stands on two strong pillars. One is enlightenment, and the other is liberation. It's in the nature of teaching, it's in the nature of education that we want our students to become more aware, more fully engaged in the world, and more free in their prospects, in their projects, in their aspirations. And so liberation and enlightenment and social justice come together, I think, in a very natural, coherent way. Privilege means the opportunity to be able to choose, the opportunity to be able to move, to have some mobility. And frankly, everyone you know and everyone I know has privilege. And the nature of privilege is that it anesthetizes you to your privilege. And I'll give you a simple example. It's very hard for straight people to see the ways in which gay people are discriminated against. Why is it hard for them to see it? Because they don't feel it, because it doesn't happen to them. And the beautiful thing about privilege is that when you see it and when you recognize it, there's a place for you no matter who you are, in overcoming it.
So we wanted to begin with this clip from Bill Ayers, who I assume probably needs no introduction. He's an educator and an activist and with a somewhat controversial history as well. Dr. Christodoulou had the privilege to study with him at Chicago, and I've had the privilege to work with him quite a bit. And one of our initial social justice efforts, which she'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, was to bring in some speakers and filmmakers and other folks into the social justice and equity class that we have, but kind of as a larger programmatic offering to have students experience thinking about hearing, interpreting social justice from multiple perspectives and the to come of justice. And also, many of us in the faculty are committed to social justice, and our research efforts involve this idea and work with social justice, although our program is not specifically focused on social justice. Our program is a program in educational innovation. And I just want to highlight a few things that you may or may not know. We're a very new program, so we just began in the summer of 2015. So we just started our second cohort of students this summer. And as Dr. Lord likes to say, we're sort of building the plane while we're flying it. And the students hopefully have had a good time helping us with that as well. So in cohort 1, we have 12 students, and in cohort 2, we have 11 students. And our program is in educational innovation. But we have 2 concentrations. So students can focus on educational leadership or curriculum and instruction. And so you have this amidst your handout. It's a 3-year program of study. They start in the summer. They take 2 courses roughly each semester. And it's an executive model where they meet 6 times across the semester on Friday nights and Saturday all day. And yes, I'll move on. We can talk more about that in a minute. They come together and study together some core classes and research courses, of course, and their capstone, the dissertation and practice that we're just getting ready to sort of launch in the spring, beginning the proposal phase. We're doing a consulting model, and we've gotten some problems from local districts. And for some of our higher ed students, we're still working on it, but getting a problem in a higher ed setting for them to explore and study and seek to understand and think about. So I want to jump more quickly, directly now, to how we thought about engaging the principle of social justice and our heart for social justice in our program. So we began with our writing prompt. So students have to come in and they do interviews, or they get to come in, and they get to write for us in an hour and a half. And so last year our first prompt was this, and you also have that at your tables with you with the links. There was too much material to kind of print it out. But we really asked them right off the bat to think about social justice or justice in education and some of the issues around that. And we gave them some fuel, some sample readings to think about and respond to and kind of craft an essay through that framework. If you look on your tables, you'll see some of the links. Last year, AERA had their theme was around questions of justice in education, so we included that theme. We included some readings from social justice and leadership, social justice and curriculum, education writ large, and also some critiques of social justice. Some folks like Stanley Fish and David Horowitz and others who, and also internal folks who critique a social justice orientation as well, so we can kind of give them a broader frame to think about it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Christodoulou, who's going to talk a little bit more about the lecture series and the social justice and equity course.
Does this work? Yes? Okay. So as Dr. Quinn said, we had in the first year, we had, I would say, social justice or oriented maybe bent, although the program is not social justice, but we did have the opportunity to invite some great guest speakers. And that happened within the context of the Equity and Social Justice course, which I was teaching in the fall of 2015. So I will just say briefly who these guest speakers were. And we were fortunate enough actually to have all of them, because they all do an amazing work in curriculum studies and social justice areas. So I will start from the, what is that? Right. For you, maybe it's left, okay. So we had Professor Ming Fang He. She's Professor of Curriculum Studies at Georgia Southern University, and she's also the chair of Division B, which is the Curriculum Studies Division of the American Educational Research Association. So she came in our classroom and she discussed, actually they were keynote speakers in one of the events we held, so it was open to other people in the College of Education as well. So Ming Fang discussed about the idea of embodied curriculum and the need to explore and interpret it from the Eastern tradition as well, in an effort to depart from the Western tradition and dominant beliefs and unchallenged and unproblematized ideas relevant to research, curriculum, and social justice. Ming Fang explores education, inquiry, and life in between the Eastern, Western, and exile philosophy and curriculum, among other things. And then, together with her, we also had Professor William Schubert, who was at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He retired, and he's also with Ming Fang He at Georgia Southern University. So Professor Schubert is Professor Emeritus of Curriculum and Instruction at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where he worked from 1975 until 2012. And he was the founder and coordinator of one of the highest ranked PhD programs in curriculum studies, which ranked first, fifth, and third in nationwide by academic analytics based on faculty productivity. He was my advisor and the chair of my dissertation committee, so I was fortunate enough to study with him. So when he came, he presented the views of intellectual traditionalists, social behaviorists, experientialists, critical reconstructionist, and socially just person. It's a new addition to his guest speakers, as he calls them. He presented the views from these perspectives to theorize on and illuminate aspects of the nature of knowledge, reality, individuals, and society, as per these lenses and orientations. Herein, he presented issues of love and social justice in education and the curriculum. We also had Jason Gulat. I think his picture is not up there, but he was also a guest speaker. He's Associate Professor of Bilingual Bicultural Education and Director of the Institute for Daisaku Ikeda, or Aikida, Studies in Education, and also Director of Bilingual Bicultural Education and World Languages Education. So he presented, we had actually Skype meeting with him and my class, the Equity and Social Justice course. So he presented a basic introduction of Aikida and provided information about how his ideas contribute to equity and social justice. Then we also had Professor Bill Ayers, and we saw the clip from his visit. So Dr. Quinn said about him, but he's formerly Distinguished Professor of Education and Senior University Scholar at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And Bill has written extensively about social justice and democracy, education, and the cultural contexts of schooling and teaching as an essentially intellectual, ethical, and political enterprise. So when he came here with us, he talked about what kind of research and thinking about social justice and research. He used his work, actually, on social justice as an example of participation, engagement, agency, and change in the world. And he analyzed the the way in which his work embraces aspects of social justice. And I think we will have the opportunity later on to hear from our students, maybe, if they, their experiences about all these opportunities they had. And finally, we had, well, not finally, but we also had with us Bill Siegel, who is an award-winning director and producer. He's actually an Oscar-nominated for his 2004 documentary, The Weather Underground, and he also received an Emmy Award in 2015 for his documentary, The Trials of Muhammad Ali. So he talked, when he came, he talked about his award-winning film, The Trials of Muhammad Ali. We had a film screening that day and discussion on equity and social justice. So Bill Siegel is Senior Outreach and Communications Specialist for the Great Books Foundation, which is a non-profit educational organization dedicated to literacy and lifelong learning. I will not say more about him, but the Trials of Muhammad Ali that we chose to screen was, which again, it won an Emmy Award in last year for outstanding historical programming, and several other awards also. So that covers the most explosive crossroads of Ali's life. And when Cassius Clay becomes Muhammad Ali, his conversion to Islam and refusal to serve in the Vietnam War leaves him banned from boxing and facing a 5-year prison sentence. When Ali chooses faith and conscience over fame and fortune, it resonates far beyond the boxing ring, striking issues of race, faith, and identity that continue to confront us all today. So these were our guest speakers. We had one more guest speaker.
Yeah, and then there's the research course. Woohoo! So something, I don't know if this is on either, but something that you have to keep in mind is our program has an extremely heavy collaborative strand through it. We collaborate until we just can't collaborate anymore, it feels like sometimes. But with the 2 courses that we're running was the social justice course and then the research and design and analysis, which is the first research course that they'll get in that first fall semester that the students come in. So in this course, in the research courses, I see it as my job as to facilitate whatever other course that I am collaborating with, because I'm providing the students with tools on how to get the job done, basically, and how do we do this. So what we were able to do is, or what I was able to do in the research course is bring in a speaker that can speak to these social justice issues, which you see right here, Dr. Jamil Northcutt. He was a fellow graduate of mine at the University of Mississippi, and he is now a current director of football administration with the NFL. And so he had done a documentary for his dissertation that examined the career transition and struggles with African-American Division I football players, so how they're transitioning. And he did such a good job that it's in production with ESPN as we speak. So he was able to come in and share some things. And fun fact, his wife went into labor with their 3rd child on that phone call. So we will always be remembered.
Yes, this is me. So yes, as Molly said, as Dr. Quinn said, she talked about the writing prompt. And in my class, Social Equity and Social Justice course, I thought that it would be neat to have the students revisit that writing prompt. Because when the students, when the candidates actually entered the program, we were deciding who is going to enter the program, who's going to be admitted, they didn't necessarily know anything about social justice, or we didn't really know how much they knew about social justice, but the writing prompts we gave them were about social justice, or with a heavy bend on social justice. So I wanted them to, during our course, our class, to rethink, to rethink and revisit that initial writing prompt, and have the opportunity to revise it after going through different experiences and doing different activities associated to equity and social justice. So, I gave them that assignment to revise their initial writing prompt, actually, and they worked with that, and I think it was interesting to see the progression of their thinking, and of course, which our thinking is always a work in progress, hopefully. And then we worked with, so this is my third year in this area, and I did have the opportunity to visit the Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, and I felt very lucky for being able to visit, for living so close to the center and being able to visit it. And it was such a powerful experience for me to be there. And then I thought that I wanted my students also to have the opportunity. I didn't know if they had visited the center before or no, but we often, I know from myself, whatever is close to us, we just don't visit because we think that we can do it easily. So I thought that my students should have the opportunity to visit the center, but within the framework of an activity, of an assignment. So the other assignment I gave them in that course was to visit the Center for Civil and Human Rights, and I just wanted them to observe things and share with us their observations. I was interested to see what had an impression on them, and just share that within the context of the assignment. So that was another assignment I gave in that course. And I think, if I remember well, the students told me that was one of a very powerful experience that they had. Just watching all this audio, video, this material that is in the forms of audio and video and different other exhibitions that there are there. And all these stories that you can observe and find in the Center for Civil and Human Rights. And then my Dr. Buning, Megan, will talk about the sharing assignment that we had.
So kind of going back to what I said previously, we have this collaborative thread. So it's our job to work together across whatever courses are being taught. So we had to think of how can we work social justice and research together, and to me that sounds fairly easy. So what we did is we created these shared assignments, and the biggest one, the culminating project, is what you see here, and there are others which I'll get to in a moment. But basically what we did is I have the cohort, they work in research teams to get them ready for this dissertation in practice, which for us is going to be a team effort. And so they were strategically placed into groups primarily based off of what topic that they chose in the social justice course. So they're creating their teams and they're choosing a topic to study or a problem to study in the social justice course, and then we bring that into the research course. So they work on this data collection and go through this whole process of actually conducting a mini study based off of their social justice topic. Now, something else that I want to kind of prepare them for is I don't want them to think along this traditional 5-chapter dissertation. So to try to get them to think creatively, the requirements for the research course were, for the final project, they had to pick a unique way to present their topic that was not a traditional paper. So they did a write-up for Dr. Christodoulou's class, and the presentation was the focus for my class, and I'll get to those back in a second. But here are some overlapping assignments, and there were individual assignments that are mixed in with this as well. So if you want to talk about that sometime, please catch me around. But all of these assignments built into that final project. So we're not doing anything that is tedious outside of what they want to do. So what you see here that's reviewed by both instructors over here on the left, my left, is they had an option to do a pop-up video type of format, an interactive website. They could do an on-site stakeholder presentation, and then I did leave room for traditional research manuscript, meaning like an art manuscript to be presented to a journal. And what we received, these are just some examples, is we received a Weebly, which was very well done. It's appealing, appeasing to the eye. We received a Thing Link. This is an interactive, so each of the little cherries or whatever those are, you can click on one of those and it tells you about the traditional stuff that you may see in a research study. We had a stakeholder presentation, and then we had a voice thread presentation that was well done by the students up here, which they're going to share about that project now.
So a picture is truly worth 1,000 words. When we were introduced to the possibility of this project, you can imagine the variety of emotions that we went through. We were trying to combine just learning about social justice and the way that that impacts all of us, but at the same time learning about the different designs of research. And of course, some of us had been students a little more recent than others. So here we were in the second semester of our program, and once we took a step back and really thought about what we could do with this, I think we all became excited about the possibilities. The possibility of exploring a problem in our own community, yes, looking at something that we had a true interest in, but even more than that, really digging into something and identifying a problem that people wanted answers to. And so our group in particular chose to look at the perceptions of secondary female leaders in regards to some of the barriers that impact promotion and practice. So it was our first major group assignment, and so we were excited because we were working from different organizations, looking at things from different perspectives, and our cohort actually spans over 4 different school districts, plus we had 2 people in there from higher ed. So we had multiple perspectives on this particular project.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about our actual research project. We began with this problem, the phenomenon of the disproportionate number of female leaders in secondary schools. And so that led us to the research questions of what perceptions do female administrators have regarding barriers to promotion and practice in the CSRA. And the CSRA is the area that we live in. It's the Central Savannah River area. What are some of the experiences that have led to these perceptions, and how might these perceived barriers impact female leadership practices? So for our study, we decided to approach this with a qualitative approach, methodology, and we were leaning heavily upon phenomenology and feminist theory. We actually decided to have I just went through the research questions. We did 6 semi-structured interviews where we left space for us to have probing questions. We interviewed female administrators that are here in the CSRA at the secondary level. So there were some female principals and female assistant principals as well. Through those 6 interviews, we collected those, we recorded them, and we learned quickly that you need 2 devices recording during this process. Then we had to transcribe those interviews, and we coded them and then analyzed them for emerging themes. And so the emerging themes that were generated from this, some of the overall themes, we found that gender bias was perceived prior to leadership promotion. Strong cues existed that suggested decision makers preferred a male to fill vacancies. They were expected to exhibit certain traditionally associated male behaviors. They were stereotyped regarding their ability to discipline effectively. They were concerned about being viewed as emotional. Others doubted their ability to juggle the role of leadership with family responsibilities. And last, their greatest doubt and opposition came from other females. So, in conclusion, I hear a few yes. So, we did not interview males in this study, so we perceive that as a limitation to our study. And we thought that it would be interesting to balance the female perceptions with the male perceptions. And if we continued the study later, that was an approach we wanted to take. We also felt like it would be pertinent to examine in county level positions that females occupied because we only examined school-level positions. But overall, we expected that we would uncover some socially constructed stereotypes about gender roles, and the interviews actually illuminated a variety of perceived barriers to promotion and practice of leadership for local female principals. Let me switch to my other slide. Okay, so our next thing we wanted to just go through a few of our perceptions of this assignment. And what we felt like overall is that this assignment was one that changed our views as individuals, as female workers, employees in local school districts. It changed our view of other women, peers, students, leaders, and how we relate to them. In the interviews we had with female administrators, they consistently brought up that females were their greatest opposition, that when they would present a problem, they present a solution, that females were the ones that responded in a way that wasn't supportive. But if males approached the same problem with the same solution, it was accepted as rule. And so that was one that we took to heart when we are back in our schools. So gender equity was one that came to the forefront, and it is still in the forefront for us in our daily practice as educators. In our final paper that we wrote for Dr. Christodoulou, we, in lieu of a formal conclusion, we had to add our own personal reflections about this project and about what we perceive as being important about this project. And that one piece there was extremely important to us because it made us stop and think how we were going to apply this and how this was going to change our practice.
And so as we reflected on that, one of the things we had to do when we finished the project was to reflect on what this did for us and what was the advantage of working on these two courses together. And what we talked about was that, as we were learning this, instead of it being theory and what someone said, and of course we did look at the literature, but it was much deeper and a much richer experience for us to be working on a project as we were learning this. So we walked away with a greater awareness as individuals about some of the social injustices that exist, because not only our project, the other students in the class as well, about some of our responsibilities in dealing with social justice and making others aware. And then some of the perceptions versus the realities that exist. That was a great awareness for us. And the broader implications. We were looking at one isolated study, but there are some broad implications. And then as educational leaders, we talked about, again, as our roles as whatever it is, as district, school leaders, what have you, that we need to review our programs and practices and policies from this lens and look at some of the things that we do in institutions that actually promote these things. That when we're talking about professional learning, and I heard somebody say not to say that word earlier, but when we're talking about professional learning with others and making them aware and of some of these things, human resources, the people who are in charge of hiring and that kinds of things, and realizing that the same biases exist there. And then going back talking about innovation, which is the whole basis of this program, what are some things that we could do to combat some of these social injustices and kind of where we were going.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is fast talking for Southerners, because I don't know why they asked me to MC, because I'm the worst time management person ever. But we wanted to give you as much of a context of what we're doing, so we can get as much help from you as possible. And I knew I'd forget this, and I'm glad that Megan mentioned it. Our program really is, we want to model what we have students do, and so it's very collaborative by nature. So we collaboratively design the courses, we're doing some co-teaching, and then we're trying to find ways to bridge the classes each semester. And now Darla and Niki are going to talk about something we did this semester to bridge the cohorts as well.
So as we mentioned many times, it is a collaborative endeavor. And of course the challenge always is, how where personal or individual work may become in this, when you have to collaborate, I think you have to contemplate between the individual and the collaborative work we do. And I think it always must be, there must be coherence in what we do, in all of the, that's how I work, at least the projects that we do, and then the teaching, and then the service. How do we find coherence? And within a collaborative program. So I say this because we often decide to collaborate, and then that's what we did recently in one of, actually that was less than a month ago, in two of our classes, the Equity and Social Justice course, that was the second cohort of students, and then Darla's and Molly's class, which is the advanced research methods, I think, qualitative research methods, but Darla will talk more about that. And so within that context, we decided to bring a little bit of our work and have the students think about research and social justice. I used to have, one of the previous projects I had was the Cyprus Oral History Project. I come from Cyprus, and so within the context of talking about different kinds of injustices and inequities and so on, I wanted to present to the students the Cyprus Oral History Project and the context there, what kinds of things are going on there, and then talk about the Cyprus Oral History Project. So we decided together to give that as an example, and how that was used in the material that were produced, how we're used to develop some curriculum for classrooms, school classrooms. So that was an example that we used. And then we brought our other work, another project that we have here in the CSRA, and then we brought that to have them think about this context. And I will let Darla, Dr. Linville, talk about that other project.
Right, so following on Niki's expertise as an oral history researcher, she's brought Molly and me on board to do an oral history project here locally, looking at the local educational context and interviewing educators here about their educational experiences, either as students or as educators, and what kind of important impacts they've made on the educational opportunities, structures, offerings here in the CSRA, which, as Marianne mentioned, is our local area here called the Central Savannah River area. Niki presented, we brought our classes together on a Friday night in October, and Niki presented about the Cyprus Oral History Project, and then I presented about just the very beginnings of data that we have in our CSRA Education Oral History Project. And we had the two groups of students talk about this data, talk about what kinds of things oral history can tell us, and look at these data in two different ways. So in the Equity and Social Justice course, the students looked at the data in terms of what kind of curriculum could be built from this data, and what would be interesting to use here, and what kinds of information from this data would you want to bring back to students in your district. And in the qualitative research class, we had students look at the data and do various kinds of analysis. Actually, Brandy Hinnant-Crawford gave us a reading from Miles Hubermans and Saldana, where they use various methods of coding that's very concrete. Some of you probably use it in your qualitative research classes. So these coding methods that they outline in this article are very concrete, and so we use those very concrete methods of doing qualitative data analysis and had students compare using various methods of coding, what information do you get from these transcripts. And then the students spoke to one another after they were done about how they would use this oral history information as a piece of their educational work moving forward. How does research inform our educational work? You know, is sort of the overarching theme. So we want to show you just one of the clips from one of the oral history interviews that we have. It's my fault. I didn't clip the video. I just stuck it in there thinking I could do it manually. So I can clip it.
Tell us also a little bit what it meant to be segregated. So what it looked like.
Oh my, it was really bad. You had two separate things. Everything was separated. In all the schools, you had black schools and you had white schools. Black private schools, and you also had white private schools. You had a white this and the same thing, a black one over here. I got in a lot of trouble when I was teaching in the public school system for trying to teach African American history in February. But right before I tell you about that, I want to tell you what happened my first year of teaching and my first month in this all-white school. This parent called me and she said, "Why are you in our school?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Why are you teaching in our school? You are a nigger, and I don't want any niggers teaching my child. And you need to go to a nigger school." So I said, "Mrs. Green," I'll never forget her name if I live to be 100. I said, "Mrs. Green, I am an African American. I'm not a nigger." I said, "I don't know how you came up with that name." And I said, "I was sent here by the Board of Education. I didn't ask to come here." I said, "I was trained to teach all children, not just black children, but all children. And I will probably be one of the best teachers your son has ever had." She said, "Well, I don't want you here, and I wish you would change your mind and go to another school." I said, "Well, your wish is not going to come true because I'm not leaving." I had expected something like that to happen, and it did.
So what comes out in the Cypress Oral History Project, and also what's come out in several of our transcripts in the CSRA Education Oral History Project, is a call to social justice in the way that Bill Ayers called us to think about social justice, a call to be more aware to be more engaged in our local communities and to work for more equity and inclusion. And so I didn't say this well before the clip started, but I wanted to say those were some of the conversations with students that came out of this joint work that we did together in our course.
So we wanted to give you a little bit of what we've been trying to do in terms of infusing social justice and commitments to equity and considerations of equity and education in our coursework thus far. And we've been told that one of the great gifts of being a host is that we can have a plenary session where we can get help from the consortium. Our big question here is, how can we keep this commitment going? How can we develop it, build on it, deepen it, etc. in our work? And so we'd love to hear from you all about what you can share with us about what you're doing in your programs, or what you've seen here, what you've heard and interpreted about the kind of social justice themes that are coming up from our local context and through our courses. And what we've done here to do that is at each table, you might have more information than you want, but we gave you the overview of our program. We gave you the social justice writing prompt material. And then I think on the third page of the stapled handout, you'll see 3 broad questions that we've tried to get more specific to see if we can get you to help us with this. And I think we have about 20 minutes. And so our hope was that each table would just decide on one of these questions that you wanted to discuss and pursue. And you have a marker and chart paper through which you can maybe write down some of the things that are coming up. Questions? So everyone looks really excited. I think there's coffee. You could jump up and down for a minute if you want to.
There's a fire in our building. Something. Fire?
Although we're tight on
This is about your oral history project here, the educational oral history project.
20 minutes.
My great aunt, who is in her 90s.
We did well with time.
Oh, yeah.
After this? Okay, so I should I put 20 minutes?
Wasn't it beautiful?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity for making me step out.
Wander around and see what they're saying.
Yeah.
There's a fire in our building. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Fire should put out. Not a literal fire. Sorry about that. We haven't tried to look at it. I thought maybe there would be guests.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, we think. We will see. We don't know. We haven't been presented with the final breakdown yet. That's up to the big guy. Next semester. That's a whole other paradigm in itself. It doesn't scare me. We've done so many group research projects that I look forward to having the group to work on.
Sure.
Last thing, oh, we have to stand by our poster too, don't we? But they've heard it.
They've heard, yeah. Nobody will come.
I totally didn't have the last slide in front of me. So I was winging it.
It works fine because you did a great elaboration of the actual research, so it works fine.
I was
gotta be flexible.
Something, and I'm like, wasn't gonna stop me. So I was like, yes.
Hi, John.
Hi,
Angela.
I'm Marianne. Nice to meet you.
Are you on that yet? Or you haven't over?
We will not be starting it until January.
So this we'll talk about the
That was our second semester in the program.
Yes, a year ago.
It was a year ago, yes.
How do you imagine like different format, similar, different?
Well, the way it's going to inform in our dissertation is a dissertation in practice where 3 local school districts have presented a problem. We will be in a. We already know that.
We just don't know what
We know what the 3 problems are. We've kind of guessed. Okay, one's about a PBIS system that's been implemented. One's about a dramatic decline in ELA grades because we have a new state test that just came out 2 years ago. And
that's right.
Yeah. And then the last problem was on the Title I, Title II funding in a county and how if they've been properly spent for one particular low socioeconomic.
The one that they did for your class, they made a web page.
Yes.
We basically ranked ourselves. We were given a survey where we want to work, what are the reasons why we want to work with this problem, but we weren't told which district is which, even though we could guess. Basically, and so we will know. He said, Dr. Lord said maybe next weekend. I have a feeling it won't be until. I don't think it'll be until
we can all
November.
work with any of them because they were all
can.
common problems, really. Yeah.
And they're nice formats. Karen said they're really easy to work in.
What's going to happen is in next semester, one of our classes is going to be our dissertation, almost like a lit review class, where we're working on that. It's going to be our comprehensive exam, but we'll know what problem we're working on. We'll probably have already been in that area, gone through, and we're able to do some kind of just overview of what areas we need to look at. And then that will be part of our semester. It depends on which problem we have. And so when I was looking at the PBS problem, I definitely was thinking that we need to see what is actually going on in that area. So we're going to have some type of ethnography just at some point to get an idea of what's really occurring. The school districts have provided us is very these are the problems, but there seems to be a lot of missing information that needs to be addressed.
I think a combination. Like in some cases, they've somewhat identified some preliminary issues, but not really dug and gotten those root causes. So I think they're kind of depending on us to do that, but also to help generate some solutions. Right.
Our problem is we have students who aren't.
Because we don't know what things they've tried. So once we get that, know what our problem is, then we go, and when we go in and speak with them and find out, what are some things you've already tried and that kind of thing.
Well, I remember that was the problem in particular. They wanted to have something to do with his limitations, and so they had a list of things that they were questioning.
Yes.
You're welcome.
So that might be what they found on.
Wow. So do we just sit here until?
I guess so. I was going to tell them. My great aunt, I interviewed her in my master's degree. I did basically her oral history.
Get out of here.
She was the first Title I teacher in 96 South Carolina for elementary.
Get out of here. Which which topic did you express the greatest interest in? Of those 3 topics they gave us?
Of the Title I.
Title I. Okay.
That was.
So you have.
And then probably after, they all are interesting now.
They are.
After we started digging a little deeper, I'm like, there's something in each of them. But that one was really interesting for me. Because there
already throwing money, let's see how effectively it's being done.
Yeah.
And let's see about what those teachers think. What do those students? What's the difference?
I see, because we're big Title I district. I see because it's federal money and because it's, people look at it like it's a lot. It's really not a lot. I mean, it's like 10% of our budget.
Yeah. And it comes with lots of strings.
It comes with lots of strings, but people think that it's extra and you're supposed to just buy stuff. Like, we need more computers. Just buy us some computers. Just, you know what I'm saying?
And you see the way that district has approached it. They said it's mainly just personnel they use the money for.
Which is,
I mean,
the money is, well, I guess it's, yeah, I can see that.
But if
we
it's
some
only
instruction.
new teachers, because they said that a problem with retention, right? As well too, teacher retention.
Gotcha.
So there seems like
Title
there's a whole
IIA has a lot to do with HQ and
that one interests me.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go tell them that because I wanted to see if she would qualify. She's still living, and she's still lucid, and she has some unique insight. Unique, if they wanted it. Okay. What I was going to tell you.
Yeah, that can sound.
My great aunt, she's in her 90s.
Yeah. Hello, friends. We have about 8 minutes left, and we'd love you to write some things down for us.
Niki, I was going to mention something. You know, we were talking about the oral history approach and what you're doing here. So Thursday, Carl Whitman's issue was around justice, poverty, and Wigginton's Foxfire Project, which is, he did it early, he was away from it for 20 years, and he's on the board right now, so he's coming to ask the question, so why are we here? The questions around teaching. So the justice issue is profoundly rich this week, even with Carl's thing on Thursday.
And we could pull just that question, why are we here? We could interrogate each of those words. Why?
Yeah.
We. And here.
What is we?
And
You know, yeah.
This local context.
Absolutely. So I'm over here getting chill bumps thinking about the intersection. Because as a college, this is what I want us to be that, to wrestle with the hard questions in a fair, just place.
Yeah. So that's going to be on Thursday, you said?
Yes.
So Thursday,
That's what Carl's thing is going to be on Thursday nights. And because you are always, you come to my home, you've been there, you won't ever come to my home. So, you know, I don't know what that's about. I know.
You're going to have us too.
Yes. Will you be there Thursday night?
Oh, that's delightful.
Well, I want you to talk to Carl. He loves talking to other people than me, anyone else, and ask these questions because he asks, why are we teaching? Why are we here at school? What's the issue? And he's about to get his Wigginton piece. He's finishing out some work with that. So,
All right. And then you can learn more about Foxfire. I think I can tell you Brad is at the University of Georgia, and that's one of the things that he studies because all those and the student-generated books about the history of the area, history of the law. So when I search Foxfire, it gives you these results like
I thought there was a meeting.
No, something else. Foxfire Project. University of Georgia, maybe.
Yeah. Just tired.
I graduated in 90.
Laura had a great
I thought it went really well, yeah.
And that's like a lot of people.
That's not that recent.
We have to start talking.
Yeah, that all runs together. So we're just switching it. We had, in one of my classes, we had a small talk and spent some time there because it's one of those, it was new.
Right now they're going to go? Our more of it we're going to introduce right now. So we go down there maybe while they discuss, and then we'll come back up to
Thank you. Staying here or all right, my dear. Yes, yes.
Right? That's one of our questions. Is it just this one course, and then we drop the ball, and there's no more social justice? Well, we didn't do the prompt. Oh.
What else you didn't do?
I'm on it.
Oh. And we also.
I'm not on? CPED friends. Hello. Is this better? I'm sorry to interrupt the rich conversations. We're looking forward to hearing from you, your wisdom and insight and questions. But we're going to flip the order a little bit. Before we open it up to your comments and questions and ideas, we have the privilege of hearing from Kofi Lamotey and Kate, I have to get your last name right, Strom, who have agreed to be respondents. So I'm going to turn it over to them with thanks.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Kofi Lamotey. I'm at Western Carolina University. I want to do a couple of things. I want to make a couple observations, then pose a couple of rhetorical queries, I guess you could say, talk a bit about social justice, and then make some closing remarks, all in my remaining 4.5 minutes. Two observations. I just mentioned to one of the colleagues at Augusta that it's always a challenge to open yourself up to others to solicit feedback, no matter how good what you're doing is. And so I applaud them for doing that, but also I applaud them for the humility that they've displayed in what they wrote, what you heard, and what was on the PowerPoint projection. They talk about their program being a, quote, program in the making. And in fact, that's what all of our programs are, because we're all developing and improving, and these convenings help us because we have an opportunity to interact with other people who may be doing one aspect of the program better than we are, so we can learn from them, and they might be able to learn from us, and so forth and so on. They also talked about us, quote, joining as we think about or think through the efforts of our program, and they also mentioned the notion of seeking insights from others, and so we applaud them for that, the humility reflected there. The second observation I would make is that I was struck by their connecting what are typically disparate experiences. And I'm thinking about the admissions writing prompt and how they incorporate that into classes. We have we don't call it an admissions writing prompt, but we have a writing assignment at Western Carolina that we require students to do as part of the admissions process. There are 3 questions. The first one is on social justice. They have to answer that one, and then they can choose the second or the third to answer in addition to that. But after we evaluate those and make admissions decisions, we don't think about those assignments again. And so I was pretty impressed with the fact that they took that, not a curricular item, so to speak, but incorporated into the curriculum. And then similarly, I was impressed by the oral history project and how they incorporated that into the curriculum. A couple quick queries. I wonder, and again, these are philosophical, rhetorical questions. I'm wondering if Augusta University has thought about other opportunities to connect, again, seemingly disparate experiences to the curriculum. Second, I'm wondering what kinds of learnings they've had as a result of working with their first cohort that started in the summer of 2015. Of course, we're wondering how this session will be able to help them. I'm sure that there'll be a tremendous amount of feedback that they'll get from all of us here. And then I thought about a question regarding the cross-class collaboration that they're doing. At Western Carolina, we actually teach our research classes and our leadership classes in the same room at the same time. So our classes are on Friday nights and all day Saturday, and students come to class to meet with a research faculty member and a leadership faculty member during that whole period of time. They'll trade off. One person will talk or lecture for half an hour, and then the other professor will talk. And so those kinds of collaborations, I think, are very interesting. I know a number of you are doing the same kinds of thing with your classes and in your programs. A word briefly about social justice. We try to employ, as many of you do, a social justice orientation within our program. And of course, we're all growing in this regard. And I think Katie's going to talk about this social justice SIG and how we're going to be able to communicate on the internet, on the CPED website. But at Western Carolina, our social justice orientation includes a deep understanding of social construction and power relations related to forms of exclusion, accompanied by a commitment to the execution of system-wide leadership practices that leverage high levels of equity for all students. And that's played out in a number of ways. We talked about the admissions writing assignment. We look at issues like the diversity of our staff or our faculty, the diversity of our students, the curriculum that we offer to students, making sure that those experiences are diverse. Extracurricular activities. Last year, we had Lisa Delpit on our campus for a couple of days, and she interacted with the students within our program. And there are a number of other things that we're attempting to do, again, to emphasize this social justice orientation. Finally, two or three very quick observations, or maybe two observations, or maybe one, given time. One of the things that I always try to emphasize with students, and I consider all of us to be students because we're all lifelong learners, is that we have three responsibilities. The first is to study, which has two dimensions: studying to be successful in school and studying about one's people and the relationship between one's people and other people in the world. The second is taking care of our bodies in terms of what we eat and exercise. And then the third is being socially just, being socially active, being involved in social justice issues. We live in a world where people continue to be discriminated against based upon the color of their skin, their gender, the amount of money they have in the bank, their height, their weight, their beauty, their religious orientation, their sexual orientation. And all of these are issues that we have a responsibility to struggle against in our lives in general and in our educational leadership programs. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie Strom from Cal State East Bay. So I'm just going to make a couple more comments, and then I will leave you with a call to action. So let me add my thanks for Augusta University faculty for continuing the productive and important conversations about social justice from our last convening in Portland. And then I want to say that I really appreciate the emphasis on place-based education. So as we know, the historic and contextual issues of a particular place shape the social justice issues that have to be battled in local educational settings and communities. So to include this aspect in the preparation of educators is critically important so they can develop a contextualized notion of social justice as well as a broader sense and tackle local issues. And second, I want to thank your students, Angela and Marianne, for raising gender as a social justice issue. And that's especially important given the insidious misogyny that's rampant in our society and has been all the more visible these past few months. So, and excuse me for getting political here. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. As a woman, I felt physically assaulted watching a presidential nominee denigrate and objectify women daily, and on the national stage continually interrupt and condescend to his female opponent. So given this context, the challenges of women leaders is an extremely salient issue right now. And, you know, as we await the possible shattering of America's highest glass ceiling in a matter of weeks. So in closing, just a call to action. I want to emphasize that we must continue to probe our own beliefs and actions as individual faculty and as collective programs regarding social justice. It's work that's never done, as we've been hearing about today, and it's work that's more critical than ever, given our current context. We're living in a time where extreme poverty and lack of educational opportunity are feeding a wave of xenophobia and nationalism, a time where people are more outraged over a man refusing to stand for the national anthem than they are about black men and women being murdered in the street by police. A time where a national conversation on rape culture has opened up because of the predatory remarks and behavior of a man running for our highest office. So at this time in history, we have to remind ourselves we have to be political. Our work is political. And if that makes people uncomfortable, well, we have to get uncomfortable. And we have to talk about things like white supremacy and rape culture, because otherwise we can pretend that they don't exist, and we can be complacent. And if we're complacent, it means that we're complicit. So in these times, we have to deliberately choose social justice or justice, not just as a buzzword or as a vague reference. We have to be explicit about our orientations. We have to put it on our websites. We have to have conversations with faculty to define social justice and connect it to historical and current issues in our local context. We need to purposely operationalize it in every aspect of our practice and our programs, in our admissions, in our coursework, in our pedagogies, in our advising, and in our dissertation and capstone processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie and Kofi. It's hard to follow that rich inspiration and heart, which I really appreciate. I'm going to ask our crew to come back down. We only have about 10 more minutes, maybe a little bit more than that. We want to hear from you all. You might have questions, or you might want to share with us. I'm kind of told that this room isn't great for sticking up things on the wall, but we're going to keep these because we want to use them. But can we hear from some of you in terms of your conversations, how you address these questions, or general comments and questions that you might have? Angela? She's still here? Marianne?
This is for you guys and for Kofi. I think you said you do this at your place with admissions. For any other place that has people write an essay in real time as part of their application process, I'm curious to hear how you use those to make your application decisions, really, because, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this and wondered, do you only take people who sort of are at a certain level when our mission is to try to help people get to a certain level, whether it's in terms of writing skills, in terms of awareness about social justice issues? Is it a litmus test? You know, like, what exactly do you use that essay for? And by the way, I love that you come back to it. I agree. I think that's just so important. But I'd like to know more about how you and other programs use it initially.
Thank you. Can you hear me with this mic at all? Because then we can pass this one around. I don't know if the faculty, others want to comment. My response would be, I think we use it holistically in terms of looking at, you know, all the information that we get about the candidates. So I don't think it's a litmus test or that we were looking for a certain belief about social justice or definition or understanding, or maybe even commitment to it. I think we were just trying to see, well, where are people? And our program is still, there's students in the room who'll moan. It's still pretty writing intensive. And I guess we were trying to get a pulse on where are students with the writing before they come in. And we develop an orientation that we've more and more started to focus on the writing, academic writing. So I guess I would say I hope we don't use these in exclusionary ways, or we haven't.
I can add to that. We actually, the steering committee, went back and forth on this writing prompt. And Molly, I'll have to give her all the credit. She came up with this writing prompt, and we were like, dang, I don't even know if we can respond to that, because it was so rigorous in our opinion. And we also went back and forth on whether or not to provide them with material prior to read, to give them kind of a heads up of where they were going so they could have a way to frame their response. And I will say that we knew that we were going to bring the prompt back in at a certain point because we wanted to use it as this growth. Where have they come from when they came in, and where are they now, and how are they seeing those sorts of things? So we had that intentional approach from the beginning. But I don't think that we looked at one prompt or response and said, no. You know, there was other things. And plus it gave us a starting point to have discussion with them moving into the group interview.
And I should add, there's some cohort 2 folks here, and they're saying, I didn't do this. So our prompt focused on innovation this past round. And I think we've seen the usefulness of revisiting, and so we haven't yet. But that's a part of why we're thinking also, how do we keep the social justice moving when we haven't explicitly addressed it right from admission?
Okay, this might be my hobby horse, and if it is, I apologize. So my question is this, and this is actually not just for your program, but it's for all social justice-oriented programs, including the one that I'm directing, and so it's my challenge as well. Bill Ayers was talking about the gay and lesbian movement, and one of the things we got to keep in mind when we look at the gay and lesbian movement, just as we look at the feminist movement and so on and so forth, is that there are two aspects to it. One is a kind of a social movement aspect of it that has to do with moral commitment, that has to do with enthusiasm, that has to do with struggle and awareness, and the other is the nitty-gritty of plotting every step of the way. So a constitutional right for gay marriage or gay same-sex marriage is impossible without that plotting. Every local ordinance, every little thing that happened, every court case, the Human Rights Campaign as an organization that raises hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, and so on and so forth. It's a constant plotting. So that's the other side of the movement dynamic. As educational leaders, as moral leaders, we kind of cover or answer to the movement side, but we also need to answer to the other side, to that plotting. That is our unique role in the society. We are dealing with highly bureaucratic organizations, and I mentioned it yesterday in the workshop. In the city of XYZ, which I will not name, every single person in that organization is highly committed to social justice. They went through social justice-oriented programs, among them, some of them that were presented here. And yet, we don't see a lot of social justice-oriented practices because we're not moving our programs from the social justice discourse to the social justice practices. There is a different step. So when we talk about improvement science, design-based stuff, this is my hobby horse. When we're talking about that, we're looking for the translation of attitudes and moral commitments to actual practices. And I would say, you know, I love where you're going. I think it's a wonderful expression of moving people towards the commitment for social justice. But since you asked the question of educational innovation, innovation means that you apply new knowledge to existing practices. I would say the question is, okay, what is your next step? Not to be answered now, but this is my challenge as well. What is our next step that helps us create not only powerful moral leaders, but also powerful leaders who know to strategize, to design, to learn, to develop new organizational practices and the like. Anyway, so that's just, you know, as I said, my hobby horse.
Thank you. We'll get back to you on that.
We had the pleasure of your dean joining us at the table, so we actually had some opportunities firsthand to ask some questions. But what we talked about at our table was our interest in your intentionality to build 2 social justice courses as opposed to maybe making it social justice one of your program outcomes and looking at social justice practices across all of your coursework. So I was curious to hear from you as to why you made the intentional choice, and it looks like it was intentional, to embed 2 courses instead of having it be part of your cultural fabric in the course.
Great. Yeah, I hope it is the cultural fabric. To blame other people, which I know isn't a very socially just thing to do. The program that was approved in innovation, and the courses were designed in advance of many of us coming, but I think we're all thrilled to have a course on social justice and equity because you can go deep and really engage people. And then as we're building the plane, as we're doing the program in the making, I think we are trying collaboratively to think not just social justice, but all the CPED principles, but how do we make it a part of the fabric, and how do we build it into all the courses and keep it going? I don't know if things will change or not. We have new names, and we're in new departments. We've been moved. So we have started a conversation about what is our vision and, you know, what is going to be the foundational fabric. So my thought is that some of that will come forward as we move forward.
Is this on? Yeah. I'm the other co-director of the program here at Augusta University. And just to elaborate on that a little, we do have the one course, and it is a foundational course, just to get students to be able to talk about it. But the theme does run through all of the classes. I mean, I know the ones Molly teaches, and I know the ones that I teach. I mean, it is a common theme that comes up of social justice, and not just as an add-on, but as a fundamental core as to what is discussed. And what you said earlier about what the next step is, I think it's a bigger problem than just coming up with a next step. The voice of educators is quite impotent. You know, there is no voice in educators that's out there. Billions of dollars are poured in by other sources, Pearson, that are trying to control what is going on in education, and educators don't have that voice. You know, there isn't that big, powerful voice saying, here's what we need to do, here's why social justice is important, here's why we need equity. It's all about being able to sell something. And the message right now is just being drowned out by other groups that do not care about those things because of profit.
Time for one more question.
So I just reflect on even the comment you just made. CAPE is constantly telling us to show impact of our programs, and we're asked to demonstrate value added. I can't imagine more value being added by any program, any educational experience, than enhancing human worth and human dignity for all people.
Can I just jump in for a second? And I think that when we talk about innovation can be a very exciting term, but also a very problematic term, because innovation for whom, and who do we exclude when we are talking about innovation, and how many people can be innovative, and all these kinds of things. And I do think that we live in an era that it's totally different from previous times, and I think we've said, and our respondents also talked about this, and so I do think